Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue on with the next segment on today's show. More contract talks, this time focusing in on one of the running backs, one of the highest paid running backs at that currently in the NFL, in Alvin Kamara. Like most teams, the New Orleans Saints concluded their mandatory minicamp last week on Thursday, and Alvin Kamara had been there for the majority of it through the first 2 days, but it was that last day, like I mentioned on Thursday, where he decided to not participate. And a little bit odd, because if you're going to do the first 2 days, why not just conclude it all and finish off the week practicing with the rest of the team? But reports say that Alvin Kamara was not present initially at the facility, or he was present at the facility, but he did not take part in the last practice for the New Orleans Saints. Then you had further reports saying from the NFL Network's Ian Rappaport confirming that Alvin Kamara did not participate because of the contract issues on his current deal with the New Orleans Saints. Ian Rappaport got that confirmation from his communication with Alvin Kamara's agent. So that seems to be the issue right now, and raising a lot more question marks around New Orleans and around the Saints as to why this is going on. What is wrong with Alvin Kamara's deal that could force him to miss the last practice of mandatory minicamp? Well, to give you guys some background around Kamara's deal, currently he has 2 years left on his contract, but those last 2 years are where the problem starts to come up, because the salary currently that Alvin Kamara is making is around $15 million per year, but in those last 2 years it will increase to 22.4 in 2025 and in 2026, and it will also cost the New Orleans Saints $29 million against their salary cap once that salary for Alvin Kamara does go up. So not the best of situations, obviously, for the Saints, already having enough salary cap problems as it is. Adding this onto it really puts them in a very bad situation on really just having any room to maneuver and do anything to try and improve this team, because right now they're really plateauing and staying right about where they are, 9-8, 8-9, 7-10, around those sort of records where, as a fan, how could you get excited if your team really just isn't allowed or isn't able to make any moves to improve this team because of that bad salary cap situation? They have to try and improve it. They've been trying to improve it over the last few years, but this will certainly take a massive hit in all of their progress that they've made so far. And so far, sources close to Alvin Kamara have said that he wants a new deal before his salary cap does jump up, so that is a more positive thing for the New Orleans Saints, because usually players want more money when their deal is running out. So they are very fortunate that Kamara, according to these sources, say that he wants to figure out something else before that does jump up. Maybe just get more guaranteed money, but not as big a salary cap hit for the New Orleans Saints. But again, the problem comes up where not much progress is being made from both sides on negotiating a new contract. It's been pretty stale up until this point. There hasn't been really any updates, or we really haven't heard anything at all this offseason on any contract restructuring going on between the Saints and Alvin Kamara, which leads a lot of people to believe that the Saints could actually end up releasing him or just cutting him before the start of next year. Probably before the start of the new league year. Next offseason would probably be a high likelihood that he gets cut by that time. So this year could be the final year potentially that we see Alvin Kamara in a New Orleans Saints uniform. And I think about that statement, and I do remember now that Alvin Kamara is 29 years old, and it just doesn't seem like that, because to me, I don't know if I'm just thinking wrongly about this, but it just seems like Kamara's only been in the league for about 4 years or something like that, or 3 years. But that could also have to do with the New Orleans Saints and just how, like I mentioned, how just average they've been, not really making too much noise. They bring in Derek Carr. Chris Olave's a nice piece, but other than that, just staying around the mid-tier level of teams. They have a solid defense, but offensively they're not too exciting. So it's just been a lot of give and take so far with the Saints. And Alvin Kamara has been one of the most exciting players to watch and to support throughout this entire time. So to say that that could come to an end, it could benefit them salary cap-wise, like I said, but also what does that do for the level of your team, for the quality of your team, if Alvin Kamara does move on to somewhere else? And if he does move on, he currently sits as the highest paid running back in the NFL, currently at $50 million per year. Still second to Christian McCaffrey, and the likelihood is that if he does move on, again at 29 years old, he'll most likely have to restructure that deal because no one is going to want to sign him if his salary is going to go up that much. So a restructuring will almost certainly happen after and if Alvin Kamara does move on to another team. And once that does happen, the market price around him would probably be around, I can't imagine, no more than $10 million for a 29-year-old running back. As good as Alvin Kamara is, he doesn't have too much leverage to, push that number up a little bit more because he is coming off one of the least productive years of his career, only attaining 694 rushing yards, a total of 1,100 in scrimmage yards, and 6 touchdowns overall in 2023. Not the best and most eye-popping numbers for a guy, like I mentioned, at the level of Alvin Kamara on his best day, maybe a year or two ago. He was making a lot of moves, making a lot of headlines, just carrying this Saints offense on his back, and now he really didn't do too much to alter their direction, really impacting games so far this year, or I should say overall last year. And with that being said, not too much leverage to take into contract negotiations. So where does that leave him? Could this be the final year for Alvin Kamara on the Saints? I probably would say so. I think it comes to a point, almost like Dak, when you're thinking about a quarterback and trying to get better, you keep getting to the same point and thinking you're doing all right, thinking you're at least not getting worse, but at the same time, if you're not getting worse, are you really actually really getting better? If you're just staying at the same point year in, and year in, thinking that eventually, you're going to grow a little bit more, I wouldn't buy that as a fan. I wouldn't be happy at all if I was a Saints fan and just seeing the same thing over and over and over again. It's been too long without seeing really any better results from the New Orleans Saints at this point, with the same crew coming back year in and year out, like I mentioned. There is a good chance now for the New Orleans Saints to take advantage of this situation and to go and get a little bit cheaper, not have a massive contract on their books, and take advantage of that. Maybe you don't have as high of quality on your team, but at the same time, that salary cap issue that you've been trying to fight off could get a little bit better. So at least one aspect of this entire puzzle is improving at that point, whereas you keep Alvin Kamara, you try and restructure something, and maybe you still finish with a 7-10, 8-9, 9-8 record, and you go out in the first round, and then really, what have you really gained or what have you really improved upon at that point, especially in that division? Because if you look at someone like the Atlanta Falcons, they go out and make a big move for Kirk Cousins. They have Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts just itching to contribute to this offense, and a lot of people have bookmarked them to be the favorite, at least in that division, and make a lot of noise overall in the NFL. They're getting better. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers got better from last year, so now they're looking to grow a little bit more. I would even say the Carolina Panthers have gotten a lot better, revamping their offensive line, trading for Deontay Johnson, drafting Xavier Legette from the University of South Carolina. So they're making moves. They're trying to get better, and the Saints are so deadlocked because of the salary cap issue. And if you have to get rid of Alvin Kamara, even though it's going to be extremely tough to move on from a player of his quality, I think you have to do it at this point. Something has to give to at least try something different if you're the New Orleans Saints to get better results. And if you don't get better results, at least you know and aren't just sit there getting the same results and just wondering what could happen if we do this, what could happen if we do that. You have to take action at this point. For me, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be good once and if this news does break of the Saints moving on from Alvin Kamara. But that is the running back market also at this point. Not a lot of them stay past 1-year extension with their teams. I think a lot of them would say they'd be pretty lucky to stay with one team past the first extension. Similar situation with Najee Harris and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not a lot of running backs stay with that same team for the majority of their career, just based on the running back market. So this wouldn't surprise me at all. And the Saints could, in a way, take a step backwards to try and gain 2 steps forward in the long run to try and improve and get better results. That's just me and how I feel about it. The salary cap really isn't something favorable for the Saints. And at the same time, with Alvin Kamara, I think he could, if he does move on from the Saints, go on to a different team, and maybe he produces better, has more juice in his legs, and he could get back to that Alvin Kamara we know and love. So that also could be a positive for Kamara and the Saints if the contract negotiations don't move on any further in the next few weeks before training camp or during training camp. I think it would be written on the wall that, this is just coming to an end. We can ride off into the sunset in 2024 and then just go our separate ways. That's how I feel about it. If there's any Saints fans listening, tell me how you guys feel about it. But I think 2024 will probably be the last year for Kamara in a Saints uniform. And in saying that, we're going to move on with the rest of the show. Another break coming up, and then on the other side, we're going to talk some more contracts, shifting over to the AFC and focusing in on Cam Hayward and his situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's trying to play a little bit longer, but will the Steelers cough up enough money to keep him satisfied and keep him in Pittsburgh for the foreseeable future? We'll talk about that more after the break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Look